Hello everyone, and it's time for the 3.0 Sage review. Now, what an interesting expansion it's been for a Sage, this one. We started out DPS-wise. We'll start with the DPS, move on to the healer. We started out OP as hell. We were ridiculously overpowered, okay? Telekinetics was insanely OP, okay? It had a 2-button rotation, basically. For leveling, now you got Force Quake at level 12. You could go from level 12 to about level 50, spamming one key. Okay, and then eventually you got Telekinetic Wave. It became a 2-button rotation. Force Quake, Telekinetic Wave, and that was it. You could spam Force Quake. I saw that so often in Flashpoints, is people single target using Force Quake. It was so overpowered, especially with the utility that made it do 25% more damage. And of course, if you couple that with Telekinetic Wave, then it was insanely overpowered. I mean, it was insanely overpowered. I mean, it was just ridiculous. And we saw fights like Bulow, where they would cheese the fight. Like, you would see cheesing done by Sages to get 7-8k DPS. Even Underlurker, they could cheese 7 to 8k. You'd have the tank position the boss between the adds, and if you stood in the right spot, you could again hit the Underlurker with your telekinetic. Is it Force Wave or I can't remember what it's called. It's the big AoE thing. Chain Lightning, it's called on the Sorcerer. If you hit that as well as Force Quake, you could hit like 7 to 8k DPS on Underlurker. Of course they were going to nerf it. BioWare see those numbers, they're going to nerf it. So partially it's the player base's fault. Balance was shit for most of the expansion. Some fights it kind of got a look in, but really it wasn't really viable. PvP, it still was useful in PvP, but the fact that dots couldn't be cleansed made it a bit useful as well at PvP. But TK had the mobility as well, you know, and giving TK mobility and insane burst was just ridiculous. So a lot of PvPers actually went away from balance to TK. Right now the sick kind of, I think telekinetics is still ahead slightly. Balance is still pretty bad, I'd say. It's still, I mean, it's not one of the, it's not unviable, but it's really annoying. I mean, it's just a really annoying spec to get right, really. It's not hugely hard, it's just a pain in the arse in terms of resource management as well. Balance, I honestly not a big fan of it personally. Leveling with it is not too bad actually. But yeah, so TK did get the big nerf. I think it was 3.2 or 3.1, I can't remember now. But it was a huge nerf. Now they did go overboard. BioWare did overreact, really. They did nerf Force Quake, which fair enough. Okay, stop people cheesing it. It was good enough. But then they started nerfing our multi-strike chance, and that really kind of killed the spec as a raiding spec. The big problem with the Sage was that it was quite fragile on certain fights. Fights like Underlurker with the constant damage going out. It was very fragile, but you brought them to the raid because they did good DPS. I mean, yeah, they could self-heal, but self-healing was generally a DPS loss, and Underlurker was a big DPS fight. And yes, they did have their bubble, but, you know, they could spam self-heals on themselves, but again, you had to cast it, so you were losing casts of damage abilities, that's what you meant. You did have your Force Mend, which again was an instant cast heal, and you did have your bubble thing. You had the 2 bubbles, you had Force Armor. Your bubble was a DPS loss if the ads were still up. Bear that in mind. And Underlurker was all about DPS, so people say, oh, your bubble makes you immune. Yeah, but you can't do anything while bubbled. Okay, you can't do anything. Next expansion, you're going to be able to move while bubbled, apparently, so that's going to be fun. That's going to be interesting. It is in the data mine. We haven't seen the actual official things, but we'll check that out when it comes out. So there you go. You're gonna be able to move while bubbled. I don't think you can't cast offensive abilities, so again, DPS loss on that. So after the nerf, they became useless for fights like Underlurker because their DPS loss and they were fragile. They just became a burden. And I know quite a few people just gave up on Sages. I mean, it's one of those classes that they ruined again. They had to just ruin it. I mean, why ruin it? They like the Shadow, they just said, fuck it, we don't know how to balance this, so we're just going to ruin it, essentially. And that's why we ended up with class stacking, you know, where everyone's a trooper, basically, nowadays. You know, be a trooper. You know, because you got the mobility, you got the defensive abilities, you've got the DPS output, you know, to do things. Everyone ends up being a trooper for raiding these days. It's boring. It's boring as hell right now. The fact that they just flat out killed 2 classes, killed both consular DPS classes in PvE, which I think is really stupid, to just go out and kill them and say, fuck you, consulars. Now, on the other side, the healer class, which started out the expansion a little bit weak, if we're honest with you. Did start out a little bit weak. I think a lot of us were trying to figure out how to get the best out of Wandering Mend. Once we figured out that Wandering Mend could bounce back to the original enemy, if only the original ally, if only 2 targets had taken damage, we realized, hey, this is quite a good spec. Once you learned that, you could use it like almost like a single target heal. And after 3.3, it just became OP as hell. The Sage is the OP healer right now. It is absolutely ridiculously OP right now. You've got Force Armor, of course, which is awesome. Kind of annoying if you're healing with a Scoundrel, because you're going to fuck their HOTS over. Yeah, you're going to fuck them over with HOTS. It is the thing, you're going to bubble everybody, really, but, I mean, you're like a Scoundrel sitting there going, fuck off, right? I've just pressed twice as many keys as you to get my HOTS up, and every single one of them is going over. Like 90% of those HOTS are going over. So you'll fucking learn to hate Sages. Yeah, as a Scoundrel healer, we hate Sages, and we hate their fucking bubble. Hate their stupid channeled ability that can be used on the move. Again, they've got the mobility. Their sustained AoE is where they are weak. Because again, Salvation isn't great these days. It's too slow ticking. Wandering Mend, however, is fucking epic, okay? Use that with potency, have enough crit rating, and Jesus Christ, it's like, you can get, if every one of them crits, which I've seen happen a few times, or at least 2 of them crit, you can get like 2 or 3 11, 12k heals in a row, and it's ridiculously OP. It's like, if you could hit 4 of them in a row, it's insane. Insanely overpowered. And bear in mind, it can bounce back to the original target. It can't bounce to 2 targets twice. It can bounce target A, target B, back to target A. And that's ridiculously overpowered. Okay, how is any other healer in the game, save from maybe the Commando, meant to compete with that? It's like, Jesus Christ, that is going to get nerfed. It is going to get nerfed. That is a certainty that Wandering Mend will get nerfed in the next expansion. Definitely. They have to nerf that, because that is overpowered as hell. It's saying that is a fun class to play, though. You do have the mobility. You can be lazy. You can sit in DPS for half the fight if you're not raiding HM ops. Like hard mode flashpoints. Spend most of the fight DPSing, because we bubble up. Oh, taking a bit of damage. Oh shit, potency. Oh, everyone's taking damage. Force potency. Rejuvenate. Rejuvenate, force potency, Wandering Mend. Oh, everybody's back to full health, back to DPS. It's kind of fun. So if you're a DPS and you want to try out a healer, it's pretty easy. The Sage is pretty much easy mode healing, because it's insanely overpowered right now. I mean, you can just be lazy. That's what they say. Sages are for lazy people. So if you're lazy and you want to do a little bit of Sage healing, then, you know, go for it. Go for it. Definitely give it a go, because if you're so lazy, then go for it. Commando, a little bit of effort. Scoundrel is quite a lot of effort. Again, PvP, that is ridiculously overpowered, your Wandering Mend. Because again, can't be interrupted because it's not a casted ability. And again, using Healing Trance on the go is pretty nice. Again, you've got your instant cast, Benevolence. You've got your Deliverance as well, which can have its cast shortened. So you have the most mobility. You have one of the biggest burst heals in the game, and you've got decent sustainability if you've got a decent amount of crit. Now, if you have the 6-piece set bonus, you can drop a little bit of crit, and I've got the 6-piece set now. It is quite fun playing with the 6-piece set, but it is a fun healer to play. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's simple, but it is ridiculously fun. You jump on your Sage when you're kind of bored, or you're kind of pissed off at Scoundrel healing, and you wanna get a little bit of fun. You jump on your Sage. Don't do it for progression. But I jump on it, have a bit of fun, and you know, it's a good healer. It just lacks a bit of depth, really, or a little bit of management, because we never have to manage our force. Even after 3.3, it's just like we're drowning in resplendent stacks. We're just drowning in them. We're just throwing them away. Actually, just throwing them away because we can just go, oh, we're low force. Oh, 3 stacks of resplendence. Boom, boom, boom. Back up, full force again. Back, healing. Good times as a sage, bear in mind. It is a good healer to play, though. I mean, it is a good healer to play. So if you're looking at getting into healing, check out a sage healer, because they are ridiculously easy to play at the moment, and quite rewarding. It's a lot of reward for little effort. Saying that coming from a bitter scoundrel healer, actually. You know, take my word for it as a bitter scoundrel healer. So yeah, the Sage had a bit of a mixed bag expansion, really. We're getting to teleport in the next expansion, really. So the healer is the place to be, really. DPS, it's okay, but you're gonna run into issues with survivability a little bit, especially on fights like the Revanite Commanders, especially, where your AoE is pretty awesome. It's gonna get you aggro, so you're gonna get aggro in those fights, bear in mind. In HM, they just murder you with a few hits if you're not careful, but they do have the mobility, and they do... their burst got nerfed a big chunk. So yeah, Sage Healer is the spec to play. Sage DPS, if you're doing story mode, doesn't matter. If you're doing progression, might want to think about a commando if you're a ranged DPS, because that's where we are right now. That's the class balance in the game right now. So anyway, that is all for this video. Next up, we'll look at the Vanguard. We'll take a look at the big Vanguard, one of the best classes in the game right now. We'll take a look at the 3.0 Vanguard. So anyway, that is all for this video. So thank you for joining me, and we'll see you again soon, and goodbye.